The Garden of Eden story doesn't make any sense at all. It makes zero sense. It is the most ridiculous story ever, if you look at it and believe that it's true. But if you think, well, it's a metaphor, it's okay. Hello, you gorgeous little weebles and weebleettes. How are you doing? Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Can you remember that? Today I'm talking about something, a little bit of a polemic topic. It was polemic, and people told me it was polemic when I said life is a game and that we shouldn't take it too seriously. And some people said that that was very naughty of me to say that. How dare I say that? So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll give you the opinion of the emissaries on that. We'll talk all about it on the other side. So I think I mentioned that years ago when I was having a very, very tough time in my life, I had on my vision board, life is a game. And it brought me comfort. It brought me comfort. That's why I put it up there. I'd heard, I'd gone through, during the 80s, I'd gone through all of this business training and management training, the 1 minute manager, and absolutely, and all of that. And I'd learned to think that life was a game, to be played, right? Very important. It was a game to be played. And so I put that on my vision board. And at the time when I did that, my life was in total disarray. It was a mess. I'd lost the career of my life, a career of 20 years, down the pan. I was doing the shittiest jobs you could possibly imagine, delivering bread, delivering magazines, working as a waiter in a restaurant. My wife had had an affair and I found out, and we split up. I'd moved into this tiny little flat. I was bankrupt, and I just didn't know who I was or what I was or what life was all about. I was not a happy bunny. And that little phrase, life is a game, just helped me. It helped me come to terms with the fact, because I thought, at least, if this is a game, I'm not going to take it that seriously. If I thought that life was really, truly not a game, I'm not entirely sure where I would have been mentally. It would have been a lot harder to cope with. So I mentioned that, and then in the comments sometimes people are saying, are you saying that life's a game when in that country all of these horrible things are happening, when this is all happening, and what about the children and all of that? And honestly, I understand exactly why people would say that. And they listen to me saying life is a game and think that I'm being flippant, that I'm dismissing or I'm making less of stuff that's going on. And I'm not. Not at all. Not at all. So let me just juxtapose a couple of things here. First of all, when I am faced with what happens in this world, when through just bad luck I happen to be given information about what's going on in the world, it's very common. It's happened to me various times where I just break down into tears, and it's just too much for me to handle. And I think, how can that happen in this world? And so I'm not impervious to what's happening. I'm fully aware of what's happening in this world. And at the same time, I understand that, for example, I don't think this isn't my world. This isn't my world. I'm sure you think this is not my world. Why would we have a world like this? What would be the purpose of having this goddamn awful shit place? We wouldn't create that. And yet here we are. Now, I firmly believe that the metaphor that we have in the Bible, right, the story, there's a lot of stuff there. They're like little clues. The emissary said they're like little clues that we live. Don't believe the lot. Don't believe it all. Otherwise, you'll make yourself look like a twat. Truly, oh no, I've offended some other people now. If you believe the Bible fundamentally, then you've got to accept things that are horrible. You're going to accept things from the Bible that are happening today that are disgusting. And then in the Bible, they were disgusting then. And so you can't accept the whole thing. But it's filled with these beautiful little clues and little metaphors to point you in the right direction. And one of them is the story of the Garden of Eden, yeah? And the story that the devil was cast down to earth. and it was his domain. The earth was given to him. Now, I'm not entirely sure, right? It's a metaphor, right? The Garden of Eden story doesn't make any sense at all. It makes zero sense. It is the most ridiculous story ever, if you look at it and believe that it's true. But if you think, well, it's a metaphor, it's okay. But any kind of, peel away any of the arguments and they look ridiculous. I'll just give you one. I've talked about this a long time ago. But the story of the Garden of Eden, right? So Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, right? And Eve gave it to Adam. And Adam was deceived by the woman. The woman was deceived by the serpent, and the man was deceived by the woman. All right, so how about that for setting the stall? But I think that's the case. Women can run rings around us, and I love women to bits. What a combination, eh? Men's energy, the masculine and the feminine energy. I love it. We are designed to be together, but we are very different. And women can run circles around men in terms of thought processes, in terms of understanding what's going on. And women, we can be with our wife, and our wife says, "Have you seen that? Did you see that? Did you notice what she said? And look at did you notice the way she was looking at you?" And the men go, "No, I didn't." And for a couple of reasons. One is we can't do that. It's been proven in studies we're very focused on one thing. We like focusing on one thing. Women can focus on about 7 trillion things at the same time very well. And we can't. And we don't want to either. We don't want to. That would be a lot of work. And so we would rather just focus on the one thing. What, the sink needs unblocking? I'll do that. And I'll focus on that, and I'll spend the whole afternoon focusing on it. So anyway, getting back to the story. So Eve deceived the man. She said, have that, eat that. It's lovely. Look at it. It's beautiful. Get your laugh and tackle around that, she said. Okay, so they did that, and suddenly the scales fell from their eyes, and they saw that they were naked. And they ran off into the bushes, into hiding. Well, because they were also embarrassed about the fact that God had said, just do what you like, but just don't eat that. All right, don't eat that. And then they ate it. Isn't that just the way? In and of itself, God, if he was all-knowing, should have known that you don't say to people, do not. He made the brain. He knows that when you say to people, do not think of a green sheep, the very first thing that you've got to do is think of a green sheep. You just can't not do it. And then you have to take the green sheep away. So when he said, don't eat that fruit, the very first thing that they had to do was to think about eating the fruit. Very bad. Very bad. God should have known, the God of the Bible, I'm not talking about my God, God of the Bible, he should have known that. But it's just a story. That doesn't make any sense. But the point of my story with that is they ran into the bushes, okay? Eve saw that she had a bush and thought she ought to hide it behind another one. And then in the windy part of the afternoon, we all have a windy part of the afternoon, I certainly do, when God came down to the Garden of Eden to have a chat with them, he couldn't find them. Why? Because they were hiding in the bushes. Now, when I was a kid, we used to play hide and seek. Have you ever played hide and seek? I don't know whether they have a different name in the US, but we would hide from one another. And very often, I would hide in a bush. And my brother or my uncle, who's about the same age as us, they would find us. They would find me. I was in a bush, and they would look in the bush, and there I was. And they weren't omnipresent or omnipotent or omniscient. You see, omniscient means you know everything, right? And God goes down to the garden and he says, but it's windy. Oof, windy. I'm just going to come for a chat. Where are they? Right? Where are they? I can't find them. They're hiding. Right? If you're omniscient, nobody can hide from you. Nobody. You know everything. And then he said this. So I'm kind of generalizing when he said this. He said, they're hiding. They won't have eaten of that apple, will they? That's what he said. They haven't eaten that apple, have they? If he was omniscient, he would have seen that. In fact, God knows the future and the past and everything. He would have known in the moment that he made man, he would have known that they were going to do that. But he didn't. What's going on? Something wrong with the story. And that's because it's just an allegory. It's just a story. please don't believe it to be true, because then that would make a mockery of God. And some people say, but God gave them free will, and so no, he wasn't, but he still would know they were hiding in the bushes. You know, for God's sake, you don't have to be omnipresent to find somebody in the bushes. Richard Attenborough did it for yonks with gorillas. And so, getting back to my point, God gave the earth to the devil. A big present, given what the devil had done. That was an incredible present. Like, what was that about? You're very naughty, you've been very bad, and because of that, I'm going to give you the entire earth realm. So that whole story makes absolutely no fucking sense. Except the bit that makes sense to me is, and I will gift you the whole earthly realm. It makes sense to me because when I look at the earthly realm, I know that it's not mine. It's not something I would make. It is of the devil. Do you agree? I'm sure you do. This is the devil's world. How do you know it's the devil's world? You just have to look and see that the devil inverts everything. Good is bad, bad is good, up is down, male is female, and female is male. Look at the statue of Baphomet, a man with boobs. Right is wrong, happy is sad. This is where we're living. This is not our world. We have come down here to witness this. We've come down here to watch this, but it's not our world. The longer I'm in this world, the less I identify with it. And especially now, never more so than now, because the veil has been lifted, because we're in the revelation, because we are seeing perfectly well whose world this is. And so when bad things happen, what I don't do is get disappointed with mankind. Sometimes I am. I lie. Sometimes I'm very disappointed with mankind. But generally what I'm aware of is that this is part of what goes on in this realm. This is a bad realm. And it was made that way on purpose. So now you might be saying, well, what on earth? A God of love, why would he make something like this? For us to suffer. For us to suffer and to be... You have to come here and observe terrible things and feel terrible emotions. Of what benefit is that? And I'll tell you, I'll give you a story. Let me tell you a story. I don't know if you've heard of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a plant medicine, and it is the strongest hallucinogenic on the planet. And people go and they take it in ceremonies. I've been there umpteen times now. And they have, very often, the worst experience that you could possibly imagine. I had one called a bad trip. I had the worst experience that you couldn't conceive of the experience that I had. It was so horrific, it was so horrible that when I had these tiny little specks of lucidity in my mind, I was saying, if I get out of here alive, which I didn't believe I was going to, I will never, ever in a million years do this again. I'm in hell. This is what went through my head. I'm in hell. What was I thinking about? This is absolutely fucking mad. And I came out of it afterwards. I died. I had the ego death. I died to myself. It took me 3 months to reach a bit of normality. I couldn't speak. I didn't want to speak. What was the point? What were words for? It was a waste of time. And then 6 months later, I said, I think I'd like to do that again. Right? What was that about? I had the most horrific experience of my life. It was horrible, and I swore that I would never do it again if I could get out of there alive. 6 months later, I was saying, I think I'll do that again. Why? Because, and this is a standard response from people who've had that experience, is that they say it was the worst experience I've ever had in my life at the time. But in retrospect, it was the best experience I've ever had. So when I look back across my life, another story, and all of the terrible things that happened to me, and some terrible things happened to me, when I look now, I say, thank God They were the experiences that made me the person that I am, that made me strong like I am. Without those experiences, I would not be where I am, and I wouldn't be happy like I am now. So what's that about? What do the emissaries keep saying? We come here and it's the worst. This is the ayahuasca trip. This is the ayahuasca experience. It's hell on earth. And we say, if I get out of here alive, which nobody will, but when I get out of here, I'm never coming back. Do you know what? If I had €5 for every time I've heard that now, I'd be very rich. And if I had €5 for every time I said that, well, I'd have a number of euros. And yet, they say we go over, we go to a bit of healing, 3 months of getting over it. You know, let me just assimilate what the fuck happened there. And then we go, that was really quite good. I enjoyed that really in retrospect. I think I'll go back. That is the metaphor of why we're here. It's a game. It seems like it's life-threatening at the time. And yet, nothing can ever threaten our lives because we're eternal. Because we don't have an end. The physical vehicle, yes, it has an end. But we don't have an end. And so what's the point in saying that life is a game? The only point is just to remind you that you mustn't take this too seriously. You mustn't take everything so seriously. If you only believe that this is all you've got, if you believe that this is a one-time event, never again, and this is it, boy, then I would be depressed if I believed that. I would think, this is awful. But because I believe that there's so much more, because we believe that there's so much more, it means that we can look upon this as a game. Are horrible things happening? Yes. Did terrible things happen to me in my life? Yes. Did I see the worst possible, the deep depths of Gehenna? Did I see that in the ayahuasca trip? Yeah. I'm not making light of the things that happened, but just understand that they are just part of this virtual reality. They're just part of a show that we come down to see. And it's not a pretty show sometimes, but we come here and then we go back, we get over it, and then we come here again or somewhere else. We do it again. Why do we do it? Because it makes us so much more than what we are. To make metal sharp, you've got to pass it through the flame. We come here to go through the flame. And boy, there are some big fuck off bellows being pumped at the moment. It's hot. Does that mean we make light of what happens? Does that mean we dismiss what happens? No, that's not it. We've got to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. If you have both feet in, like in the hokey cokey, then that's what it's all about. Life is what it's all about, and that becomes very depressing. If you have your 2 feet out in the hokey cokey, then you're not attached. It's like, what's the point of being here if you've got both feet out? 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Shake it all about. You do the hokey cokey, you turn around, because that's what it's all about. I love you all. Tell me, have you had experiences in your life? Put in the comments if you've had experiences that were horrific, but now that you look back on them, you think, best thing that ever happened to me. I've got endless. I'd love to hear some of yours. I love you all and I'll speak to you all later. Bye-bye.